Hello, and welcome to Fic and Fiction, a magical bookish podcast for chaotic story goblins like us. Today, we're beginning a deep dive into the series that started the Sarah J. Maas craze, Throne of Glass. Today's episode is focusing on the first novel, also called Throne of Glass, but we will be reading the entire series. If you want to read along for the rest of the ride, you can check our socials for the schedule. We're not fae or princesses, but we are your hosts, Crimson,
Molly,
and Emmy.
All right.
I resent that.
How are we doing, guys? What?
I
What?
resent that claim that we're not fae or
Listen.
princesses. Like, rude. First of all,
Well,
I mean-
we're not princesses, we're queens.
too true.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know about y'all, but I haven't been able to shift yet.
Yet.
So, yeah, like, it could happen, just as far as we know.
Didn't get the Hogwarts letter, but was still holding out for
I will be holding out for a many centuries old fae prince until the day I die.
word.
I may have found my soulmate, but he could be replaced pretty easily if a certain few popped up. How are we doing this week? Are we all surviving?
It's manic this week.
Yes.
I'll let you know
Tell me more
by the
about
end of the day tomorrow.
It's a bit how I feel too. It's been really busy at work and we're at the end of a project. And so it's like scrambling to get it all done. But
Yeah,
The vibes are just a little bit. I feel like the Chaos Scoots are really on one this week. They're all hyped up on caffeine and full of sugar.
yeah.
it's like anything that is an inconvenience that could happen is happening this week. We have severely upset the chaos gods, and I don't know how to repent.
I think
Yeah.
you gotta burn a straw goat or something. I mean, I don't know.
Something's got
Feels
to shift at some point, because otherwise I'll be on a one-way trip to the Grippy Socks vacation.
I hear you on that
I
one.
love some free socks.
It's true. Socks are so cozy.
Anything for some cozy socks, I guess.
Yeah. And those little grippy bits are kind of nice because then you.
And the whole room is bed.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think that's true anymore, but the old school had it right.
Not all of the aspects, but definitely the padded room.
Yeah, just the aesthetic part, not
No.
the rest of it.
Oh god.
Well, on that unhinged note, what have we been reading this week? Molly, I'll start with you.
Let me. I've forgotten. Oh no,
I don't
I
know.
haven't. So I read A Dark Shade of Magic by V. Schwab, and it was fantastic. I've had the trilogy for a while, and it was one of those books that I said that I was going to read this year, and I will be starting book 2 tomorrow, so tells you how good it is. And then I've been making progress in Crown of Midnight, which is good, considering that's the next pod after this, or the next book we'll be looking at. And I finished A Court of the Vampire Queen this morning. So, good books today.
And how did you like Court of the Vampire Queen? Because that's one of my favorites.
Excellent, smart. Great. Yeah. It was very good. Like a solid 4 stars. I definitely think like the third one was a tad weaker than the first 2. Even though that's where all the action happens. So
Yeah. I would agree with that actually. The build up is sort of more satisfying.
yeah.
For sure. But the smut was good.
It was excellent. Yeah. What about you, Crimson? What have you been reading?
I have still been working on Iron Flame. I haven't made a ton of progress since we last spoke, since I've been so busy. I have to admit, I read a couple one-shots, so I haven't been super dedicated. But yeah, just working on Iron Flame, and then my next plan is to reread The Price of Innocence and then read the arc for Suze's next book. So it's Jay Taylor's next book in the series. So very excited for that. And then once the hype has fully died down, because people are being crazy on social media, I'll probably start Onyx Storm. Because like I've got 2 copies behind me because I was so convinced I would start it as soon as it released, but didn't get there.
People,
I wonder if by the time this episode goes live, if you'll have actually read Onyx Storm yet.
Maybe
will cross everything.
we'll see.
We'll check back in then, and we'll see.
I mean, to be fair, there is a bit of a deadline on reading S.J. Taylor's books because we're planning to have her on the pod, so I've got to get on it. So there's a chance that I'll at least be midway through Onyx Storm. We'll see.
We can cross our fingers.
Yep.
Yeah. And what about you, Emmy? What have you been reading?
Nothing.
Nice.
I will be entirely honest with you guys. I mean, I'm doing this whole thing where I have to read like a certain number of pages in the year, and it's like 100 pages a day. Except I read Onyx Storm in 2 days, and that's like a 600 and whatever page book. I've just noticed I've got like bread. I don't know what that is.
Saving that for later.
Snack.
Snackies.
Yeah, I just haven't really read anything. I read like 1 page of an L. Kennedy book. I read like maybe like 50 pages of 5 Broken Blades, but I can't seem to get into it. It's like multiple POVs, but like there's 5 people or so. It's a lot, and they all have like really crazy names, and I can't figure out which one's which at the moment.
I'm not gonna lie, I hate that. Am I the only one? Like, I can
Yeah,
deal with
I'm really
I can deal
struggling.
with like maybe 3 POVs, but once you get past that, it just feels like too
I
much.
think I might DNF. It's not hitting. It's not hitting. I don't know whether I'll keep it. I'm obviously going to do like an unhaul every quarter of the year. So I may not go back to it, and I may just unhaul it. I haven't decided. But I did start Crown of Midnight for the next pod episode, and I'm like 20 chapters in. So I have been reading a little bit of little things, but I haven't completed anything since Onyx Storm.
I like how you're like, I haven't been reading much, just 20 chapters. Like,
That's like not much.
Just a bit of light
I
reading.
know, but I'm just saying, in the grand scheme of most
20
people,
chapters
that's
is
quite a
only
bit.
like 150 pages.
For
I mean,
most
I read
people,
that
that's a lot
like
of...
I usually read like more than that in a day.
I know. I'm just saying.
Be kind to
It's not a
yourself.
small... Yes, exactly.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, so we've all been reading, at least a little bit in the case of the 20 page. By the way, I think 20 chapters is probably more this week because I think I've only read like 5 chapters of Iron Flame. So, although they
But
are
we're all
long
in
chapters,
this,
but
we're all in the same wagon,
Mm.
I guess.
yeah,
All just trundling along.
yeah. I
Molly's
mean,
a wagon like a million miles ahead of us, but it's fine.
yeah, that's a whole different story. For me,
She's paving the way.
as long as I open a book that day, I'm pretty happy with myself. So,
If you open it and look at it, you're like, yeah, that's great.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, we can't all be speed queens. That's okay. But shall we dive into the topic at hand?
Let's.
We should probably preface this by saying a couple of things though. And the first thing is that for anyone listening, we will be doing the entire Maasverse. We're gonna do the whole thing. We're gonna do every 3 weeks ish. Starting from this episode, there's gonna be a new episode on a Sarah J. Maas book. We're going to do the entire Throne of Glass, including Assassin's Blade. We are going to do the entirety of Akatar and the entirety of Crescent City. And maybe by then we'll have a new book out, or at least news of a book. That would be
That would be
wonderful. Sarah, get it
lovely.
together, please.
That would be lovely. I'm not holding my breath, but yeah.
It'll get to that point and we'll be like, here's our own take on what's going to happen. Here's our predictions.
But we have to be careful. If we hype it too much, we'll be
Mm.
mad.
True.
Yeah.
I would like to sort of preface this though and warn everybody that for anyone who hasn't read Throne of Glass or who hasn't read any of these books, proceed into this podcast with caution. We will not be censoring anything. It will be full spoilers.
Mm-hmm.
Full in-depth discussions, predictions. We'll probably reference things that are going to happen in later books in the early episodes because this is a reread for us. So
Yep.
if you don't necessarily want to hear any spoilers, then you can maybe go and read the book and then come back. That would be great. Please come back though. That would be wonderful.
Yeah, I think we'll avoid the huge plot twists and things.
Yes.
We'll try not to
the
fully
big
ruin later books, but it'll be impossible not to make
Mhm.
references.
Yeah, we'll not give the big plot twists until we talk per book. However, we will be diving in depth, and each book will be the episode will be spoiler filled. So
Yeah.
if that's not your thing, then apologies. But if that is your thing, then please stick around.
Absolutely. Well put. Well put.
Thanks.
Well, we should also preface that because I am the most recent reader, first-time reader of Throne of Glass, I did not read the first book. I'm cheating. I just kind of flipped through a bit.
Oh wait, you have read it. Yeah, I forgot you did.
Yeah, but
I was a wee bit
I'm
like,
not
I'm
rereading.
sorry.
So I'm gonna
Skipped Throne of
start.
Glass?
Yeah, just to let the listeners know, I am gonna start the reread with Heir of Fire, and I will probably also skip Assassin's Blade because this isn't a spoiler, but I just hated that book. I really did. Some people love it though.
Enough to read right now.
Yeah, I have plenty going on. So for me, I might not have quite as fresh a memory as Emmy and Molly do, but I did read Throne of Glass last year, about a year ago. So I know what I'm talking about. But
I am curious though. You're obviously like a recent reader into the Throne of Glass series. Was Throne of Glass? So did you pick up ACOTAR before Throne of Glass?
yes, I did ACOTAR, Crescent City 1 and 2, and then Throne of Glass. And then I read House of Flame and Shadow. It came out literally days after I finished Kingdom of Ash.
That must have been such a weird experience for you. Like,
I didn't
really think so. Actually, it made me very frustrated with parts of the fandom because so many like super deep into the fandom girlies are convinced that you have to read Throne of Glass in order to understand what's going on in Crescent City. And to be honest, like I didn't miss anything. And once I did read Throne of Glass, I was like, oh yeah, I remember that Easter egg. Like, you know, it's going to depend on your own ability to retain stuff, but I wasn't really missing anything. And I even think in House of Flame and Shadow, like obviously there were more Easter eggs in House of Flame and Shadow, but I was like, these still are not really pertinent to the plot. Like they don't really matter. Like if you don't
I think it's just the ability to connect the dots more than anything. It's not that you're going to miss like any like big, like major, like storylines, because in actuality there aren't any.
Yeah.
So
it's just little like tee bits or like little links here and there. It's like nothing important. Molly, what did you start with when you started?
The first ACOTAR book, then going into Throne of Glass, and following it like that way.
Wow.
I did the same thing.
Look at you. Oh, geez.
That's so interesting. I got into to Saturday Mass whenever it was just after Mist and Fury came out, like just after it came out. So I did the first ACOTAR book, but then didn't read Mist and Fury. I just started with Throne of Glass and then read all of the ones that were out at that time, and then read Mist and Fury. And I don't know why I did it like that.
Yeah.
For me, I mean, I had always read a certain amount, but I didn't know anything about, like, I was kind of out of the fantasy realm for a while. And then I sort of found Book Talk in like 2020 and was lurking. I actually started with Credence by Penelope Douglas as far as Book Talk books goes. And then it was probably like a year before I picked up ACOTAR because it was so hyped that I was just like, I don't know if I'm actually going to like this as much as people like it. Like, I don't know. But yeah. And then one of my friends had already read it and she was like, oh, you should read it. And I, was instantly obsessed. So I blew through 1 through 3 and then I took a break. And then I think I read Crescent City 1. And then I think I read A Court of Silver Flames, like in between there somewhere. Really don't enjoy Court of Silver Flames. That was a weird experience for me. I read Frost and Starlight actually after A Court of Silver Flames because I'd heard so many mixed things about it. And then I was like, I shouldn't have done that because this is such a delight.
It's not really imperative to the story anyway. So
no, but it's so cute. I love it.
Oh, it is.
It's the holiday special. So
yeah, and then I did Sky and Breath, and then after that, maybe like 6 months after that was when I started. And
Do you
I
know what's
did that
really
all in one sleep.
crazy? Molly, when you first picked up ACOTAR, and I suppose shortly afterwards when I picked up ACOTAR as well, BookTok didn't exist.
It didn't, and I was
Nope.
just about to say the reason I found ACOTAR wasn't because of social media in any form. The Beauty and the Beast live action had just been announced that they were making it, and I was like, I need Beauty and the Beast retellings. So I searched for some, and it was the first thing that popped up.
And that's how you
Yeah.
found it. I
That's
think mine was
interesting.
Bookstagram. I think Bookstagram pointed me in this direction.
I never really knew Bookstagram existed until after I knew BookTok existed. Like, I was very... I don't know. There was like a period of probably 5 or 6 years where I was just fully disconnected from book communities. Like, I would still read occasionally, but I just wasn't interacting with anybody about it. So
I don't know.
There we are.
I think up until quite recently, reading was more of like a personal experience, I suppose, because there was like a lot of judgment about the type of person that would prefer to sit at home and read books rather than go out and do things that were conventionally viewed as like cool or acceptable for young people to do. So if you were into those kind of things, if you were into reading, if you were kind of more of an introverted person, it wasn't something that you'd go out of your way to share because, at least for me, you'd get judged for it.
yeah,
So
for sure. Yeah, I think once I hit college, it was kind of like, you know, I still did it, and I had my friends that also read that we would like trade books and stuff, but I didn't talk about it that much, so I didn't
My
know
ex
about
thought
like
it
the
was
latest
weird.
things.
He was like, "You read way too much," and I was
What an
like, "He's like,
asshole.
I go out and I like hang out with my friends," and I'm like, "Yeah, I don't really care.
Yeah. For why?
I have friends. I just
Yeah.
like they just don't give a fuck either. Like it's fine."
Yeah.
thanks.
Like, I'm pretty sure even if we lived in the same city, like, we'd hang out more, but we'd just be sitting
Oh, yeah.
reading, so.
Like, I'm 99% of like sure that at least like a good 2/3 of the time that we spend together at the end of this year is going to be spent reading, just within the vicinity of one another.
100%. What's the point if we don't? So I do have a real question for you guys, though, because obviously we read them at very different times. So I'm curious, how many of the Throne of Glass books were you able to read when you first started, before you had to
I'm
wait?
going to have to do a deep dive.
I'm Googling. Yep.
Okay. There's a reason I'm asking. I'm wondering what your first impressions of just this book, Throne of Glass, was when you started. Versus what your impression of it is now, knowing what you know about the future.
Really? Was it that?
I'm just Googling.
Is that me?
Um,
It's so weird because it's like I have my noise canceling headphones in, so I'm hearing my environment like as the microphone is picking it up.
So when I picked it up, I only had, because I picked it up just when Mist and Fury came out, and Mist and Fury came out in May 2016. So I had Throne of Glass, Crown of Midnight, Assassin's Blade, Heir of Fire, and Queen of Shadows. That was it.
I had it. So ACOTAR came out in 2015 in the May. So probably I wouldn't have read it right away. So it'd probably be towards the end of the year. So I had Throne of Glass, Crown of Midnight, Assassin's Blade, Heir of Fire, and Queen of Shadows had just come out.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, so you were in the same boat as me.
So what was your like first impression? Like what do you think you would have like rated it when you
5
first
stars, 6 stars.
Really?
I loved Throne of Glass from the get-go. And this is like something that's like, this is an unpopular opinion, but to me, Throne of Glass, and obviously Heir of Fire as well, I'll speak about that when we get to that episode. Throne of Glass is like one of my top books in that whole series,
Interesting.
and I will reread Throne of Glass all the time and not read the rest of it. Like, all the time. I just pick it up. It's so good.
That is wild to me.
It is childish, though. It's more childish than the other books. But there's just something about it that hits in my
That's
chest.
interesting, because, like, for me... Well, okay, before I get into how I feel about it, how do you feel about it, Molly?
So, obviously, I had up until Queen of Shadows. And I felt that the first book, maybe even the first two books, to be fair, but definitely the first book was so different from the rest of the series. And to be honest, the fact that Emmy can read it by itself shows that it is a good standalone. And I have to say, the first time I read it, I wasn't as impressed because obviously I had the other ones as well, and they were so different. So at the time I read it, it was probably like a 3.5, 3.75. But now, having reread them a good 3-4 times, like all the way through, I have such like a nostalgic appreciation for it. So I definitely think I've rated it higher since rereading them.
That is so interesting. I really would have DNF'd if I didn't know that the series was going to get better, to be honest. Like, I found it... I think the words I used to describe it to my friend that was rereading with me was, I think this is aggressively mid. Like, please tell me it gets better.
I think it depends. Like, the Throne of Glass series as a whole has like this massive fan, and like, I mean, as the books go on, it's like, I mean, we'll speak about it at the time, but Kingdom of Ash is just like an emotional roller
It's an
coaster.
epic
No, for
fantasy.
sure. I mean, Kingdom of Ash is 5 stars, but for me, Throne of Glass is 3. And like, I was really looking at it, especially knowing the history of it and knowing that she was kind of writing it in real time on the internet before she published it. Like, for me, I was like, I don't know that I believe she had any, like, I mean, she obviously had inklings where she was going because of the things we find out later, but for me, it was like, I don't know, it felt like a formula, and it was a formula that didn't hit for me. That doesn't mean it's bad. It just like wasn't, like, I don't know. That's interesting. That's one of the reasons I'm not rereading it now, is because I'm like, not ready.
I think maybe because it's so, I wouldn't use the word mid, but like, it's not as impactful as some of the other books. Maybe that's why it's such a comforting read to me, because I can just like zone out. Like, there's nothing like that makes me go or like, oh my gosh, wow. But at the same time, it's like, oh, this is so, like, it's like being wrapped in a little blanket reading.
I'm not saying that nothing significant happens. It's just not to the extent that other fantasy books would have that kind of impact.
I think for me, everything that happened in the book, I felt like in the moment. No, I think knowing how big the series was, like knowing it was going to be 8 books and knowing that people sob on the last one and all of this different stuff, I was kind of like, this is not hitting like that. And it also feels like nothing that's happening right now is going to really matter that much. And that's kind of true. There's actually some Chekhov's guns that are like thrown out that like never really amount to anything. Like there's the whole thing with the green fire that's like, she mentions like over and over again in Throne of Glass, but then it doesn't really matter that the fire's green later. But yeah, like, I don't know. There's a lot of little things that like I was picking up on that I was like, I don't know. I feel like this isn't going anywhere. And then obviously she pivots much later in the series. So I don't know.
It is really interesting to see the way that it changes as well, because I feel like, I mean, we'll speak about it again in later episodes. I never remember what happens in Crown of Midnight. Never have a clue. I cannot remember what happens in that book half the time. And I feel like it's just almost like a little bit of a tee-hee in the middle before the series really picks up, and the series actually starts snowballing in Heir of Fire. Like, the first 2 books and Assassin's Blade are really separate.
I mean, yes, but obviously this is Crown of Midnight, so I don't want to say too much, but what happens in Crown of Midnight at the end is kind of like what kicks everything off. And I'm not
everything
even
version. It's like those last like 10 pages.
I'm not even talking about the big reveal. The instance that is the catalyst that leads to said reveal is what kicks it all off.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh,
yes. I mean, really, to me, a part 2 of Crown of Midnight is when the story starts. Like, that was really the thing is, I think because, like, okay, so, like, Throne of Glass is obviously the assassin competition, and the whole time I was just like, this can't matter. Like, it can't.
It doesn't. It really, I feel like what it did do well was introduce us to the characters and give them a little bit of a background character building moment. But everything they do in the books doesn't really matter.
And to be fair, like, just to be completely fair about who I am as a reader, I am really not that much of a YA girly. Like, I don't mind it, but my personal feeling and experience based on my experiences when I was a teenager is that YA romances in particular are often depicted in this super weird, out of touch way to me because they're not at all like what myself and my group of friends was experiencing. Maybe we were just little heathens. I don't know, but kissing for hours and nothing else happening is wild to me. Like, reading that made my eyes roll so hard. I just couldn't handle it. Like, I was literally screaming at my husband, like I need to read something else. Like, this is crazy.
Give me the penny day right now.
Yeah, and actually we still joke about that. Like, he'll like literally he'll be like, would you like to kiss for hours? We could do that. I'm like, no, never in my whole life.
Where that quote came from, let's chat quickly about, let's give a rundown of the plot and what happens, and let's talk about the characters one by one, because I'm sure we all have some things to say about some of the characters in this book.
Perhaps.
Perhaps.
Molly, would you like to give a quick summary of what Throne of Glass is actually about in the first place?
Yes, I'd love to, because you know how much I love summarizing these books for you. So, Throne of Glass is all centered around Selena Sordothian, who is a former assassin who was arrested and taken to the salt mines of Endovia, where she is a slave. And she lives with a group of other, I could say a group, hundreds, if not thousands of other slaves, under the, should we say, rule? I don't want to call it really a rule because it's more of a dictatorship, but the rule of the King of Adalin, or Ardalin, however you want to pronounce it. And one day, the prince of said kingdom comes to the mines with his, guard dog / best bro ever, Kale Westerfall, the captain of the guard, and is
guard dog / best bro ever has to be. Do you think they have little heart?
They do. They do. Yes, they do. 100%. It's fanon now.
The entire series synopsis could really just be like, Kale and Dorian are in a bromance.
Exactly.
And Selena is
Yeah,
there.
exactly.
Done.
The end.
And Selena is there to mess it all up.
Yeah. And then we get someone else popping in with his little owl feathers. Like, yeah.
Anywho.
I'm sorry, that just sent me like off the edge.
Prince Dorian comes to the salt mines, having chosen Selena as his champion in his father's competition to find a champion, i.e. assassin, to do all of his dirty blood work and whatever else he wishes. So, seeing this as her opportunity, she's like, fuck it, let's go. And in exchange for this, if she happens to win the competition and become the champion, she will, after a period of 5 years, gain her freedom. And she is all for this because she wants to get the fuck out of Aurelia and as far away from the nonsense that exists there. So she gets taken to she gets taken to the castle, which is made of glass for some reason, but is not made of glass. It's more, they've decided to build a glass castle over the pre-existing castle because that makes sense. Where she will take part in.
Also means nothing. Also seems like
it really doesn't. Really isn't. Where she takes part in a number of competitions to decide whether or not she is the one that will be the king's bitch for the foreseeable future. During these competitions, she is put up against a variety of different criminals who are all also looking to be the king's champion in a way. And they were chosen by the members of the king's court. And along the way, Selena discovers things about herself as well as the history of Adarlan and throwback to the original king, with a lot of historical nuggets of information dribbled throughout. And she also ends up having a bit of a romance. I'm not going to say who because we're about to go over it. And she meets a bestie.
Yes, the bestie is important.
The bestie is very, very important. And that is it in a nutshell. A very underwhelming nutshell, but we will get more into that now.
You left out the ghost.
There is a ghost. There are many ghosts, arguably,
also, but hearing you describe the plot just like solidified for me how much the plot doesn't make sense. Like,
it's just baffling.
It's like, so because the whole thing, something you should know about Throne of Glass, if you somehow missed it while reading, if it didn't just hit you in the face, is that Selena is known to be the most dangerous assassin on the continent.
She is the baddest bitch around.
Her reputation. She is the baddest bitch around. She is literally called Adarlan's assassin because she has the highest like kill count or whatever. And so it's like, why would you even have a competition? Like, you already found her. Why do you need... Anyway, it seems...
misogyny.
A little silly.
Counterproductive.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially...
I would also like to jump on that fact, actually, about her being, like... This is actually, it's hilarious, because I look through Goodreads reviews all the time, like bad Goodreads reviews of my favorite books, just to see what happens. Like that one we had for Akatar in one of like the previous episodes, we did that game that was like an illiterate 19-year-old like fights a worm or whatever. I did see one that was mentioning about how like the whole time it's like, I am the best, like she is the best, like this is the best person, and then someone was like, yet there was a bag of candy left in her room.
It's all.
Wondering where it's from.
like constantly. I mean, this is true in Throne of Glass itself, but it's also true throughout the series. She's just constantly not being the best.
She is the best assassin, but dumb at
Bear in mind, she is a teenager.
Yeah.
Like, are you seriously saying that somebody that has been an assassin for like 40 plus years isn't better than like, how old is she? 17,
but that's
18?
why it's supposed to be so impressive. She's 17 in the she I think she's 17 at the beginning and turns 18 during the story, right?
She does, yeah.
Like, are you fucking kidding me?
But the thing is she was already known as the best assassin on the continent when she was 16, we find out later. And so like it's a little like, is this just hype or is it real? And if it is real, then why does she suck? Because she shouldn't be able to suck and be called that. Like,
I do like the way that in this book, like, you can, like, when people figure out who she is, there's this fear. People have this fear of her and who she is, and like this, this like, it's almost like they've taken her name and run with it to the point where like she is the scary story you tell of before bed to your kids.
I think that's true. Yeah.
But then at the same time, we are constantly like, I mean, there's there's a fight scene in it where she goes up against, they're like having to do like sparring drills or something, and she goes up against someone and she doesn't even lift a sword, and she takes like the guy down with her bare hands, and she's like, give me an opponent worthy and I'll then lift my sword. And I'm like, yes, go for it. But then at the same time, like 5 minutes later, we're reminded that she is this like young girl, because she's like, give me the puppy. You can't get rid of the puppy.
Yeah.
Like,
I do like that duology that she has. I'm not gonna lie, like I do, and I'm not saying she's not a badass. She's totally a badass. It's just that like it's not giving baddest on the continent is all.
It's giving arrogant is
Yeah.
what it's given.
Yeah, she's 100%.
It's kind of makes you, I say it's kind of, it kind of makes you wonder whether, you know, the hype is because she is so young, and the fact that she does, like, I'm not saying she's not impressive, I'm saying that she is impressive, and maybe the fact that she is young and impressive has kind of like fed into this hype of her, even though obviously when people meet her and find out she is this amazing assassin, they're like, oh, I thought you'd be older.
She is the academically gifted child vibe of the assassin world, isn't she?
Yeah, but
because I mean, when we get to, I didn't like how arrogant she is, or she was, I suppose, at the start. Now, when we get to book 3, and we'll speak about this later, she gets knocked down a peg, I think she kind of goes, "Oh shit, actually, I'm maybe not like the best person on the planet."
Human.
True.
Yes.
To be fair, I didn't mind her personality so much in this book. That wasn't until, if I had hated her personality in this book, I would have been screwed, I think. It wasn't until later that I started like to struggle with her sometimes, but
I mean,
she was okay. I just was kind of like, why is she in this dumb competition? Why is this just seems, I think it's just that the stakes felt so low. Like no one was going to kill her really. It was just like, you're going to go back to this miserable life where you'll die early, but like you're not in, I mean, she was in danger in part of the book, of course, because of the whole thing with Cain and everything, but like
plots.
Yeah, plot, but like the stakes were so low at the beginning, I think, that I was kind of like,
yeah.
what's going on?
I mean, even she kind of like accepted before she was picked up by Dorian and Kale. She'd already kind of accepted that she wasn't going to live, and that's pointed out when they go over the fact that she had snapped at one point while in Dovia. And you find out in book 2 the reason for her snapping, but she takes everyone out. Anyone that's in her way, in terms of the guards, she dispatches them as quickly as possible, and she's kind of like, I'm gonna die before I actually make any headway out of this place. That's just how I end. And then after Dorian and Kale come to take her, she kind of gets this idea in her head that, okay, maybe I won't die, but if that's the case, I want to get out and get away as quickly as possible.
A lot of it's built on hope, isn't it? In this respect. A lot of it is, where can I take this? How do I get out of here? It's all about self-preservation more than anything else.
But despite that, even though, as I say, she's so determined to get out, she's also determined to be the best. She doesn't like when Kale or Dorian tell her to hold back, to not make a show of herself, to kind of be somewhere in the middle. That's what they ask her to do. So like when she's on the run as one of the trials, Kale's like, stay in the middle of the pack. Don't be at the front. Don't be at the back. Stay in the middle. Or, you know, during one of the other training trials where they're doing lots of different things in like the gym area, they're like, don't throw knives because you're good at it. And she's so determined to be the best. And it's almost like knowing the extent of her loss personally drove her to at least want to be the best at being an assassin, or being best at being champion, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
and
Yes.
be the best killer if that's what it took to survive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But speaking of, we obviously have Selena, or Selena, however you guys pronounce her name, that day. Let's chat about her counterparts in this story. Starting with the prince that sprung her from the salt mines themselves, Dorian.
Sounds like Prison Break.
Because
Dorian has never done anything wrong. Dorian cannot do anything wrong. Dorian is perfect. That's
very much so in this book. Dorian does a whole lot of fat nothing.
Exactly that.
That's true.
He buys her
Well-
candy and tells her and judges her for eating half a bag of £3 pounds of chocolate.
Remember when he's like, I thought you'd share
He's like,
with me, and
I
she's
bought
like,
I bought you
"No."
£3 of chocolate. Like, I thought you would at least share. And she was like, no, I just made myself sick and sad.
I think I am.
Legitimately, the only time in this entire book that I got super angry at Selena was when she breaks up with Dorian. Like, I was so pissed at her. Because I was like, he's perfect. He's right there. He's perfect. Why would you not? I still don't understand. I understand that it worked out the way
I
it
think
did.
that's the
baffling,
reason,
right?
though.
But what do you mean?
I think that's the reason. So Dorian is perfect. Dorian, I'm not saying he's sheltered. He knows that his dad is an asshole. It's very clear. He knows that his brother is becoming like his father. He knows that, you know, there are responsibilities on his shoulders for what he has to do in the future or how he has to progress to be the heir. But Selena also sees that he is perfect. He hasn't had to go through what she's had to go through, and she views herself in a way as kind of tarnished, I suppose.
She also can't relate to
Yeah.
him, can she?
Like,
She
emotionally,
struggles, I think, with that.
emotionally, she's more mature, surprisingly, than Dorian. Dorian is still a baby, like, in the grand scheme of things.
That's fair. And I think it's a valid argument. I don't buy it with later context, but we can't really
Yes.
talk about it until after Crown of Midnight. So
Dorian is probably the character that has my most favorite character development throughout
oh
the
my god,
series.
his character development is fantastic, and
Oh yeah.
the
I think
only
it might
thing
be
I
the best
find
character in the series that has that sort of development. Like, you see it so vividly.
the only thing I find frustrating about his development is so much of it happens in the very last book that I just want more. Like, I
Yeah.
really want to see more moments because he's not really fully baked and done by the end. Like he's close, but he's not quite there. And yeah, that stuff could have happened like 2 books earlier and I would have screamed and loved it because it was so good. But his development is very, very interesting. I would agree.
Dorian in Throne of Glass itself, he is described as basically like he is the crown prince. He is like the hottest man alive. All the girlies in the court want him. His mum's trying to marry him off. He's like a womanizer. He like grins at the girls all the time. He really is like,
he's the it boy.
just like a walking. He is the it man. He is like.
But by the way, this was one of my frustrations with the book because he's supposed to be kind of a slut, and then like he's fine with kissing for
like,
hours.
why aren't you
Make it
more
make
of a
sense.
slut? Be more of a slut.
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah. Which I didn't know this when I was first reading, so maybe now if I was doing a reread, I would be a little less harsh about it. I found out later that Sarah was originally writing it as new adult, and so it was like more realistic, and then she had to tone it down for Bloomsbury because they wanted to market it as YA. So like I get it. It's just like some of these things don't fit.
I wish we'd seen more of Dorian in the first book. Like, he kind of just shows up to cause a wee bit of a ruckus with Selena's heart, doesn't he? Like, he's just
we spend a lot more time with Mr. Leafy Greens. Yeah.
Speaking of Mr. Leafy Greens, though, let's talk about Kale.
Cabbage Head.
Let's talk about that asshole.
Let's talk about Kale, specifically Book 1 Kale. I know that we all hate Kale.
Well, okay,
There's lots of other reasons later
I
on
will
why
be
we hate
honest
him,
because I know some people who really didn't like him like from the beginning, but for me, I was like, he's fine. Like
He's
he's not
there.
exciting, but he's
But that
fine. He's
he's
there.
a bit of a dick.
But it's also
Oh, but
I
like
love
that.
your explanation of him. I love your like explanation there, because he is defined as just okay. Like in terms of like his
Yeah.
description,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, he's just a guy. Like he's there.
Mm-hmm.
It continues to baffle me when I have a friend like start reading and they're like, "Oh, Kale is so dreamy." I'm like, "Girl, your standards are not where mine are." Like, I just
Kale
don't
is just like
like power to
he's
you, but man,
just
you're easy
like
to
a
please.
wooden sword. Do you know what I
Yes.
mean?
Yes.
Like he could do the job. Also, let's talk about his job, because his whole job is like, I mean,
He
you
can't
made
do
the
the job.
description.
He's
You
supposed
said
to.
in a previous podcast episode, his job is a cop, right? He's
Yeah,
a police guy.
he's a cop.
He's to investigate, and he
Can't
cannot
do
do
shit.
that job.
So let's clarify, just in case there's any listeners who don't mind spoilers and who are not going to read the series. Kale is actually the king's captain of the guard. So he's the prince's best friend, but he is the king's captain of the guard, which means that he is in charge of all of the city like guards and all of the king's guards in the castle. And there's no like, it's not like Game of Thrones where there's like a separate city watch or anything like that. It's all one thing, and then the military, the actual soldiers, are separate, and we meet who's heading that up later. But the captain of the guard is pretty much responsible for protecting the king and solving crime. And Kale is tasked in this book with solving a series of murders and fails miserably. Like he is
This
so
man has
bad.
no clue.
He has no idea.
He's like, if you were gonna describe Kale as a cop, he's kind of like Paul Blart Mall Cop.
Yeah.
In like the grand scheme of helpfulness.
Yeah.
Well, and something I think is interesting is I think a lot of people take for granted that, like, oh, of course, the king put him into that position too early in order to have someone that was easy to manipulate. And it's like, you can't put that together until like book 4 or something. Like, it takes a long time. Like, in Throne of Glass, he's just a shitty cop. Like, he's just really
At
bad.
most, the only thing that you kind of learn in Throne of Glass that would make you try and sympathize with him is the fact that he has shitty parents. And I'm just like, that's not really a character. That's
Don't
not
we
character
all?
development. That's just life. Like that. No, can't relate. Sorry.
And so many people are like, oh, well, Kale was abused by his dad. And
Same.
I'm like, man, yeah, like, yeah, I used to have to go pick my own switch off of a bush. Like, it sucked, but it didn't like make me treat other people like shit.
And he's so fucking clueless. Like, excuse my language. I know I'm swearing a lot about him, but like, he is so clueless. He's gone to Endovia to go pick up, like, essentially the queen of assassins, and he's like, but she kills people. I'm like, no shit, she kills people. That's why she was there to begin with. Like, why are you surprised by this?
Well, in fact, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, because it has been almost a year since I've read it, maybe a little more than a year since I've read it. But the one thing that really stuck out to me about Kale this whole book is like that he was so worried about Dorian's safety. Like, he literally went and picked up an assassin and then was like, you should not speak to her. And I was like, doesn't your prince know how to use a sword, though? Like, are you really, like, that worried? Like,
something that makes me really giggle, and it was off the back of Molly's point there, is like about him being so clueless, is at the very beginning of the book, it's known that when they go and pick up Selena from Endovia, and Kale basically he brings Selena to meet Dorian, right? And she's like, we're going round and round in circles, we're going up the stairs and down the stairs, and Kale is basically trying to be like, we're trying to make you so lost in this building that if you tried to escape you couldn't find your way out. And Selena within minutes is like, we've just gone up and down that stair twice. Like, and he's trying
so hard, bless him.
Useless.
But like, no,
oh, man.
it's kind of like
17-year-old girl is like, this cop is useless.
She's basically gone pulled an Ariadne with the golden thread, like all around this like building.
Yes.
And he thinks he's being like really sneaky, but he's not. Like, are you really being outwitted
really
by a
just showed her-
17-year-old?
He's essentially just given her.
Yeah.
Well, not to mention, this cop, this man who is responsible for the safety of everybody in the castle and actually within the city, but definitely within the castle. All of these like courtiers and noblemen and what have you. He's not aware that there's a very easy to access secret tunnel coming out of her room that leads to the sewers.
You think that they would search her? Like, they had the audacity to like take like pens and like sewing needles out of her room, and yet they don't realize that there's a full secret passage.
It's not even well hidden. It's behind a tapestry.
No, it's literally just about they didn't.
I was about to say, if there was a swift wind, like the tapestry would billow and everyone would see her. Like, what? Really? Like, you took everything and you didn't check behind a tapestry. Be so fucking real.
And then, as we find out in later books, like, there's, like, one other secret passageway. Like, there's not a lot of secret passageways. It's not King's Landing, you know? Like, it's not like there's just, like, secret passageways everywhere. It's like there's a couple. Yeah. So, like, what do you mean you don't know about them?
He very much sort of sees what he wants to see. And he does, and this, like, obviously, this explains a lot throughout the series. He really does get his ass handed to him because he's like, my king who I love, oh no, he's bad. Or there's like, he gets hit by the most obvious things, but they hit him and he's like,
he's thrown
away by them.
Yeah.
My favorite, I think, is it kills me every time. So obviously, like, he knows that she's an assassin, and then he's like gobsmacked that she kills people, right? Or he helps her through this competition, and then he's gobsmacked that she now has to do the king's bidding, which involves doing her job, which is killing people. But my favorite throughout Throne of Glass is she's an assassin. Wait, like, she has other characters. She can read. She can speak multiple languages. She actually, like, she likes sweets. It's like almost like he's like, she's an assassin, so she cannot do anything else.
She's not a person or anything. She's just, she just kills people. Nothing, free time.
Like getting... Which also, he's like getting her through this championship, and then later turns around and is like, I'm mad that you're doing your job that I made you get.
It's kind of, I mean, it kind of gave the same vibes as when Ron turns around to Hermione in Goblet of Fire and goes, oh yeah, you're a girl.
Yeah. It's exactly like that. Because the thing is, that's really great about Kale, there's a couple things there, like, coming off of what you said. The first
a sentence that Crimson never thought that she...
There's a couple of good things about Kale.
There's a couple of really good things about Kale.
No, there's a couple of interesting things, not good things. No. Don't get I might have lost one of them. But one of them is the first one is, if you are the captain of the guard and you're in charge of making sure everyone's safe, while you have a bunch of trained assassins just like hanging out in the castle, you would want to know everything you could know about them. So you would be like surveilling them more and paying attention to their interests, and not just like, oh, you can read. Like, you'd be like, oh, what kind of books do you want me to bring you so that I understand like what you're reading, like what you're, but then the other thing is, it's actually really funny that he spends so much time helping Selena, because he's so concerned about Dorian's safety. But as far as Dorian and he knows, there's no stakes to losing. Like, it's literally just a competition so that you can like win the king's favor or whatever. But like, it's his son. He's just like being kind of dickish because he wants to participate. Like, he's not really...
He's just involved. Like, he's always going to be involved.
Yeah.
It does make me laugh that they spend so much time. It's like, yes, Kale, train Selena more in sword fighting while also trying to not let her kill anyone.
Give her more ways to hurt you. Great idea.
Yeah, really build up her strength so that she doesn't... It's also like, why would you not assume that the first thing she would do when she got like freed would be to try to kill the king? Like, they don't know what we know about the king, but like, if I were him, I'd be worried about the king's safety as well. And so,
Yeah, but bear in mind, he's like pissed off a part, like a good chunk of the competitions, and obviously we don't know where he went until later on. But
yeah, he really just went, here's the competition, fight, I'll be back to crown
yeah,
the winner.
he's like, I am only
Oh, no, I just
interested
mean-
when I know you're good enough. So
yeah, I just mean, you know, that Kale should be able to realize that if you become the king's champion, you're going to get like unfettered access to him. So maybe you wouldn't put somebody who he imprisoned for the rest of her life as the champion.
And if you don't want her potentially killing Dorian, maybe don't give her the tools and train her and help her get into a position where that's going to be easily accessible to her.
Yeah, it's real silly. And that's never really addressed. Like, I think maybe she had a goal to address it, but she doesn't really. Like, later, it's just like one thing after another that they have to
There's
get
too much
through.
happening later
There's
on
too much
for us to
happening.
come
So
back to this ridiculous
they never
point.
talk about like how incredibly naive they were. Like Dorian especially, it's never really addressed like how incredibly naive his participation in the first book actually is.
Yeah.
That man could not use a washing machine.
No.
and that's coming from a girl who didn't know
I
how to
don't-
use a washing machine.
I'm not sure he could heat up spaghetti.
Damn.
Like, I don't
think this man could pour himself a bowl of
He'd put
cornflakes.
metal in the microwave.
This man would try to go into a shop and buy something and not know what a coin looks like.
Mhm. And
Yeah.
if anything, Kale just gets worse. So
Ain't that the damn truth? Ugh.
Anyway, speaking about things that they would have missed out on. Do you want to play a game?
Let's play a game.
Shall
we should play a game.
Molly, this was your game idea. I think that you should introduce this.
So today we are going to play a game that is more of a TikTok trend than anything. So we have chosen to do the RIP ... character you would have loved trend that was going viral on TikTok a couple of months ago. TikTok. A little bit of Kasha. Nearly 9:30 in the evening on a Thursday. Anyway, so we have chosen.
Who says we don't have a busy, fun lifestyle,
Exactly.
guys?
We have chosen.
We're so excited.
Yeah, we have chosen Selena, Kale. Have we chosen Kale? We have chosen Kale. Kale.
Well, yes, we have.
Kale, Dorian, Kane, and the king of our darling. So, I will start. Which character do we think we should start with? I think we should start with Selena because she is the OG. So,
That's what I
Yeah,
think.
she's the queen bee.
who wants to go first, or shall I kick us off?
I think you should
Shall I kick us off? Okay. So, R.I.P. Selena, you would have loved Who's Afraid of Little Old Me live at Taylor Swift Eras Tour.
Yes,
So
she
true.
would have. Yeah.
Yes, she is the definition of that
She
song. By the
is.
way, even in the later
Yeah.
books, it just gives more and more pros that Taylor Swift is a Sarah J. Maas
She is.
and
She
loves
went
this
to the
because-
Eras
We know
Tour,
that for a
so
fact.
Yeah.
she
Did
did.
she?
She took her son,
Mhm.
raising him right.
Love it.
All right, Emmy.
Crimson?
Nope.
Oh,
Oh,
Rock, paper, scissors, quick.
Emmy, you go.
okay. I don't know if Crimson will know what this is. I don't know if this is something that's UK based only, but hopefully she does. R.I.P. Selena. You would have loved Dogs Trust. Dogs Trust is basically it's a charity for dogs that gets homes for dogs.
Oh, like the ASPCA. Okay,
Yeah.
Humane Society. All right. Okay. I'm on the page. I got it.
Molly's lost it. She's like, yeah.
Does that make Dorian the dog stress?
Stop laughing to do it. Oh my. Okay.
Go for it.
R.I.P. Selena. This is a little bit meta. I gotta warn you. R.I.P. Selena. you would have loved the Valkyrie challenge on TikTok.
Oh, so true.
She would have been a nested
Yeah.
girl, like 100%.
She would have been full throttle. Yeah.
Oh man.
Could you imagine, like, a side conversation? Could you imagine, like, giving the Throne of Glass characters, like, the Akatar books to read? Like, imagine they were just books at that time.
It would be great.
Oh my god. They would love
Yeah.
it.
We need to
Kale
do a whole
would
chapter that is
sympathise with
books.
Tamlin.
He would
You'd be like, I'm waiting for
girly, and he
Tamlin's
would think
redemption
that-
arc.
And he would think
Kale
that
and
Elaine is
Lucian
the
would
hottest
just-
Yeah.
one.
Kale and Lucian would have dinner and bitch about their bosses.
All right. Speaking of Mr. Leafy Groom himself, should we do him next?
Yeah,
Never.
sure.
Thanks. I'm good. Okay.
Crimson, I would like you to start this time.
Yeah.
Me?
Yeah.
Okay. So to understand this one, you need context that you might not have if you're just now reading, but don't worry, it'll all make sense later. R.I.P. Kale, you would have loved Trav. Because he's always running.
always
He's always like, let's go for a run, for a
Yeah.
jog. That's definitely why I picked that.
And he wouldn't need that. He wouldn't have to run through the garden and have all the
No.
ladies gawking at him.
Oh God. Yeah. He'd be the guy who like posts like an obvious thirst trap on TikTok and then is like, why are all these women disgusting? Like,
They're objectifying me.
yeah. Like, shut up,
There's a
Kale.
reason for that. Your dick's on the internet, honey bun.
Yeah, he's in like gray sweatpants and no underwear. Yeah. Molly?
R.I.P. Kale, you would have loved family counselling and the military draft.
Nice.
Yes.
Yeah.
R.A.P. Kale, you would have loved Apple Air. This man can't keep track of shit.
True.
He needs these.
He does.
There's one that's better fitting for that one later in the series.
Yes.
I'm saying nothing.
Oh.
I'm saying absolutely nothing. Not a chance.
Mm.
Um,
Who's next?
I
Emmy.
suppose we may as well complete the trilogy in
Yeah.
Dorian, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So, R.I.P. Dorian, you would have loved the mute function in a Zoom.
That's really
Yep.
good. That's
He
really
needed
good.
one of those sitting around that table.
Yes. Yes. R.I.P. Dorian, you would have loved leaving Caltana.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ghosted.
R.I.P. Dorian, you would have loved Tinder.
Oh,
Yes.
so true. But just
Just for kissing.
Just for
Dorian's sent about if you want to kiss for hours.
Mm. Do you know what? I'm gonna
Hit me
go
up.
upstairs after we finish filming this and go say it to Isaac and see what his reaction is.
Love it. Yes.
I did have one other Dorian candidate that I feel like I should say because it
Mhm.
doesn't work later, but it's just cute. It's not funny. It's R.I.P. Dorian. You would have loved bookstore dates. He absolutely would take somebody
Yes.
on one of those dates where you get like 10 minutes to pick up all the books you want. Like he's constantly just throwing books.
Do you know what? I
Adorable.
feel like
It
he
is
would do
sweet.
that for who he ends up with. So it would still happen.
I think he would too, and she would be like, "What are we
Exactly. And everybody in the shop would leave because they'd be terrified of her. But he'd be like, that's fine. I
Yeah.
just get 1-to-1
yeah.
with you, so it's fine.
I also have a second for
Mhm.
Dorian. And I'm going to throw this right here, no context, because it'll get context. We actually context in like the second
Mhm.
book of the series. R.I.P. Dorian, you would have loved Elsa from Frozen.
You would.
Yeah. True. So true.
Conceal, don't feel.
Yeah. That's so true.
Stop it.
Oh my god, that's also Kale later, but like he doesn't get that the point of the movie is the opposite.
Oh, I'm crying. Stop it.
Okay.
Oh, God. Who's next, Molly?
On to the villain.
Which one? The biggie or
Let's save the biggie for last.
okay? The biggie is in the overarching biggie? I'll say that, okay.
Yeah.
So, R.I.P. Kane, you would have loved steroids and Andrew Tate.
Would have.
The answer to it was iconic.
R.I.P. Kane, you would have loved Jim Cox.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also went down the same route and I said, R.I.P. Kane, you would have loved protein powder and workout subscription plans.
Oh my god, yes. He would have like had P90X when that was big. Like,
oh god, yeah.
Yeah. He'd be in CrossFit for sure.
He would have been one of the instructors for the insanity workouts.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Amazing.
Kane came up with the 70-day hard.
But he'd like go on American Ninja Warrior and then like mess up on the first obstacle.
And have like a bitch fit.
God, yeah.
Yes. Yes.
On to the last one.
Oh my
guys.
goodness. Crimson, do you want to start us off?
On to Mr. King himself.
Sure. R.I.P. King of Adarlan. You would have loved the privatization of the prison system.
That's feral. Okay.
That's iconic.
Yep. Crimson wins.
Yeah, I don't think we can talk about that. We will, but geez, oh. Perfect.
Okay. R.I.P. the King of Ardalan. Ardalan.
I say Ardalan all the time, so who knows?
Anyway, you would have loved the Hunger Games.
Yes.
Yeah, he loves to be stabby.
He does.
Doesn't
Yep. And Emmy.
R.I.P. the King of Ardalan. You would have loved Clash of Clans.
Yeah, you would.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Yeah, the mobile game.
I love that.
He
love
also
that shit.
He also would definitely go to Halloween dressed as the guy from the black outfit character from Squid Game. The director guy.
Yes.
He would have been on one of those trends on TikTok, you know, where they buy their girlfriends the dairy rings that you can only buy one of in your life.
Yes.
And he'd buy it for Perrington.
I'm surprised we didn't do one of these for Frederick Parrington, to be fair.
We'll get to him, it's fine.
We'll get to him later. He's not as interesting yet.
So we have mentioned a couple of characters there that we hadn't spoken about yet. But we have yet to mention our main girl, the Princess of Elway. Or Eelway. Nehemia.
Eelway, I think, isn't it?
Yes. So, obviously, within Throne of Glass, we see her and Selena become tentative besties, shall we say. They kind of bond over the fact that Selena can speak the language and no one else can. So they just meet, and she is like completely fluent. She has learned the language from the slaves while she was at the salt mines. And it's pointed out that she speaks in the same manner as the like working class, I suppose.
She speaks peasant
language. But her and Nehemia kind of like bond and start talking, and we kind of learn that there's more to Nehemia than we originally thought, in that not only is she a princess that has basically been forced to go stay at the castle to find out what the hell's going on, and kind of the kingdom and the court kind of look at her as a bargaining chip. Is that the best way to say it? They don't realize how intelligent and powerful she actually is.
Almost like a hostage.
It's a hostage situation. But she is there in her own right, kind of investigating what the hell's going on. And she meets Selena, and she's like, right, this is somebody who is clearly intelligent, and I'm not under any misapprehension. Like, I'm pretty sure she knows. Like, she knows the big no, more or less immediately.
Yeah.
Because within like a couple of times of them hanging out, she gives her a new name of Elentia, and she kind of acknowledges, okay, like, you've got many names and I'll give you this one.
Yeah.
But they kind of have this agreement where Selena will help her with the language, as in to speak the same language that they speak in Adarlan, and she'll help Selena with something else. Who wants to reveal what that something else is?
What does she help her with? God, I can't even remember.
That's helpful. Crimson, do you know? It is the word marks. Yeah.
I wasn't sure if that was this book or Chronicle.
It is, but they don't start teaching about the word marks officially though until the second book.
So,
sure,
in most, she kind of is supposed to be teaching her how to speak Elway more accurately, but we do come in Throne of Glass, or we do discover that she knows word marks because of
that
there is magic, at least in some form, despite the fact that the King of Adarlan kind of banished all forms of magic back when he invaded Terrasen, which is where Selena is from, and it is made.
Well, actually,
yeah.
I think something interesting to point out is, I believe in Throne of Glass, you don't really understand that he's the reason magic is gone. It's like magic disappeared at a certain point during Selena's childhood, and also the King of Adarlan hates magic.
Yeah,
but we don't really know how those things are connected.
We know that he banned it because he banned, like, he ordered the destruction of all of the books that had anything to do with magic. Because when she goes to the library, is it Kale or Dorian who says, didn't you have libraries like that in Orlaith or Orinth? And she's like, yes, but they were all burnt.
They were all like taken away and murdered, and
so we find out that not only did the king invade Terrasen, but it's during that invasion that she lost her parents and her family, and that's how she became an orphan who was taken in by Arabin Hamel, the kind of like the prince of assassins, and he was the one that paid for all her training and sent her off to be trained in different types of fighting and strategy, in exchange for her serving him in the Assassin's Keep.
Yeah.
And
brutal man. We do get a brutal.
We do. I mean, we don't.
A brutal description of him.
We do, but we don't really find out the extent of it until later on in the series.
Yeah. I think, circling back to Nehemia, I think Nehemia is a really interesting character looking back because she has a lot of secrets, doesn't she?
She does.
She's fucking Danica 1.0.
She is.
Yeah. And I think another thing that's really interesting about her character, that is really positive is, so when you're first introduced to her, it's kind of like, oh, she's visiting on this like diplomatic mission, like she has to negotiate for territory, but it's kind of not fully revealed until later that like it's not it's not just that like the king has a vested interest in Elwë. It's really like this is a genocide. Like you don't find out till really later that most of the people that are in Indovir or in these salt mines in different places in these like labor camps are Elwë citizens. So like at some point they do send criminals there, which is what you think it's for in the beginning. It's like a prison, but then they also just go and
Enslave
raid
people.
Elwë villages and enslave people.
Suppression, isn't it? Like it's really like you won't bend to my will, so I'm gonna put you in a slavery camp and make you do my work for me.
And part of the reasoning, I think, and something we never really explore, so I don't feel bad spoiling it, is that the people of Elwë, especially the nobility, have this knowledge of word marks, and it's the only magic that it's not possible to block, to like stop, to get rid of in the way that it's gotten rid of, which we find out later. So it's kind of interesting because you sort of think that Nehemia is just kind of a princess that's kind of stuck up a little bit, and she's there on this diplomatic mission, but she's really trying to save her culture and her people from being eradicated.
Not just that, though. She is able to engage with the magic. And outside of Elwë, not many people know how. And we see her at multiple points throughout Throne of Glass using these word marks to help Selena and help her kind of like figure out what's going on. So I think it really frustrated me, so I have to say it now. The fact that Selena thought Nehemia was the one that was killing people or was responsible for killing people and committing these atrocities, even though her entire community, her entire people are being enslaved. But Selena thinks, she must be doing that as revenge for this. But by that point, she should know her. She's her friend. They spent like a significant amount of time together. She should have the sense of self and like realization that her friend isn't that type of person. But you just don't see that.
Not to mention, as the best assassin on the continent, you would think that she would be capable of studying people enough to know what that person is likely capable of. And Nehemia never really shows violence.
No.
Like, it's really...
If anything, she's the antithesis of it. Because we don't actually find out that Nehemia isn't the person that is committing these murders until she saves Selena in the passages from the Ridak?
The secret tunnel.
Yeah, secret tunnel. The Ridderak.
Yeah.
Speaking of the Ridderak, very much in the description of Feyre and her worm. What are we thinking this Ridderak looks like, guys?
So it's described as quite humanoid, isn't it? Because it's I don't think this is a spoiler, it's just what they're called. It's one of the Venin.
Yeah.
So it was described as grey and kind of humanoid. So I'm trying to... Do you guys...
Did you just say Venin?
You mean Valg, right?
Valg, yeah, sorry. I said
Venin from Fourth Wing.
Valg, sorry.
God, Onyx Storm smashing over.
But I think that's true. I think it is a Valg because I think I imagined it actually very similar to how certain ones are described. In a very different book
style, isn't it?
In a demony style.
See,
exactly.
I don't know why.
If I was going to be exact,
I thought it was a spider.
A spider? I kind of get that, actually, though, for later.
To me, it was giving, like, human torso, spidery leg vibes.
Do you know...
I just couldn't... I couldn't get my head around.
Do you know what I pictured? The... You know, in Mockingjay Part 2, the... what are they called? The monsters that the capital set on them in the tunnels underground.
Yes.
I imagine them like that.
Yes.
Oh, interesting.
But yeah.
I think I didn't think about it too deeply. I just thought about like, you know,
The result.
like human potatoes, and I was like, gross. Moving on. Like I didn't really, which is interesting because I tend to picture what I'm reading, but I just sort of pictured like an amorphous. Like I was kind of thinking like the Stranger Things kind of things.
Yeah, I get that.
That vibe. Yeah.
So on the subject of tunnels, so in
Where's this going?
well, in addition to finding said beastie, we also find other things in the tunnel. One being an escape route that she acknowledges
But she never
she doesn't
takes.
take. She acknowledges it exists, goes, that would be a good idea if I need it, and then it's not mentioned again in that book. And then and then there's also a tomb, because that is, you know, totally what is going to be in a castle. But there is a tomb, and it belongs to two people, and those people are the original rulers.
To be fair, it is consistent because every tomb that we enter in this series, and there are several, are all in weird places. Like none of them make sense.
Yeah.
Who's burying these people? Why are they being put in there?
I mean, to be fair, it does give some logic behind the glass castle, but he'd have to know they were there. And if he knew they were there, he'd just destroy them. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, the tomb.
The tomb is a very useful tactic.
It is
in this book, because it really does give us information on history.
It does.
By using this tomb.
I think it's interesting that you're bringing up the tomb, because the thing I always think of when I think about those tunnels is actually the doorknob guy.
Yeah, but he's not until Crown of Midnight.
We don't meet him yet.
Oh, we don't meet him yet.
Which I was just about to say, I'm really disappointed that we didn't meet him until Crown of Midnight. Also, how did
sarcastic
exactly how did he not say anything? Anyway, we'll get to that in Crown of Midnight. But yes, there is a tomb, and you say the doorknob, but I pictured. Have you guys ever seen the Da Vinci Code? You watched the film?
Actually, I have not. No,
I have not.
So I'll give you a rundown, very short. So in the Da Vinci Code, they are on a hunt for clues. Shock, I know. But they end up trying to look for the body of Mary Magdalene, who in the Da Vinci Code universe is or was the wife of Jesus Christ. And when they come across the last clue that takes them to a church in France, they go down stairs to the cellar and then down the stairs again in the cellar, and it's described that the ceiling that she looks up at a sky of stars, and there was stars on the ceiling, and that's all I can picture, because we do get some information about the tomb and what it looks like, in that there are stars and constellations on the floor, which I will bring up when we look at the Maasverse. We talk about the Maasverse in a later episode. But we see stars on the floor, and that's all I can picture, and the way that I picture it, which is probably not very accurate, to be fair, because it's probably more grand than the random tomb in the church. But yeah, anyway, that is my TED Talk.
I really like some of Selena's first impressions of this tomb, because the two people that are in there, I suppose this isn't, this whole thing, spoilers anyway, so is Brannon, he is immortal, a mortal, not immortal,
He's human.
and his wife, who is a half-fae, and her name is Elena.
Yes. She's important.
What I think is very interesting is that Selena knows Elena to be this warrior fae, this warrior, battle soldier kind of gal. But when she's in the tomb, she sees Brannon's armor, and she makes this description of Elena is displayed as almost a pretty little flower. The tomb is all very pretty, and then she goes where's her armor? And I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, because we see the suit of armor and we also see the sword, which becomes extremely important throughout the series. But it's just kind of mentioned, oh, there's a sword there. It's the legendary sword. Like, okay, cool.
It's jeweled hilts full, and
Yeah.
I will say, like,
It's
we're
shit.
bringing up a lot of things that are like, yeah, we use that later, but it's not here yet. And I think it's really interesting because one of the things people tell me about Sarah J. Maas sometimes is, like how she's the queen of foreshadowing. And they point to that stuff in Throne of Glass, which I think is really interesting because I don't think that is what that is. I think she left herself a bunch of things she could do things with. And then, like,
I think that she just writes and then she thinks,
yeah.
oh, I could probably go back to that. I'm
Like, we
gonna go
don't
back
pick
to
up
that, and then I
anything
might
to
not.
do with the stars on the floor until a completely different series in the universe. So it's like, it's just, she leaves herself a lot of things. I don't think it's the same thing as being like the queen of foreshadowing in that sense. I think she becomes much more of that, but I don't think she was that when she was
I
writing
think
Throne of Glass. I think she just
really
wrote a bunch of random shit that was
she's
cool.
just a really good storyteller and really good at like picking threads apart from her previous books and going, yeah, I can do that with it. But
I definitely feel like she used to read fan fiction because, like, that's a very fanficky thing, is like you left yourself some random shit that you don't know what to do with and you turn it into something totally different.
Throne of Glass was published originally on a fanfic site.
It
was on Fiction Press, which was, kind of like adjacent to fanfic.
Yeah, it was adjacent.
And it was a Cinderella-esque retelling, so she was 100% a fanfic girly. There's no way about it.
Yeah. I knew some people that were on Fiction Press, though, and didn't, like, they were kind of snobby. Like, they saw it as a separate thing. But I totally buy that she's a fanfic girly. Yeah.
But speaking of Tomb, and speaking of people in Tomb, we get a rather persistent individual, and that is Elena. She is dead, but she is also a cosmic nuisance.
Very much a nuisance.
She goes into this tomb and she ends up having this conversation with Elena, and she's kind of looking at Selena. Ooh. She's looking at Selena and is like, look, I can use you. I know who you are. You're not getting away with this, and you need to save the kingdom. You don't get a choice. Because there are bad things. Like, there's more going on than you realize, and you are the one that needs to fix it. Like, sorry. And Selena's like, fuck off.
I have a lot to deal with.
I'm not doing this.
I've got Kane and his ever-growing muscles. I've got Kale and his inabilities, so I need to solve his investigation for him. I've got Dorian, who's trying to snog me at all times of the evening.
And I'm potty training my dog.
Hours. Oh my god.
And the king looks at me every so often.
By the way, I don't think she did.
Oh, fuck no. No.
Oh no, she asks.
She tells them that she requires it if she's going to keep it.
She's like, I want this dog to be trained. It must run with the other dogs, and it must do this. And Dorian's
like, anything else? Would you like fries with that?
I will say,
Your Majesty.
I will say that, like, that she, like, one thing that started bugging me about Selena in this book, but like gets really annoying for me, is her persistent, like, no, I'm not going to do that. Like, she just literally gets told by an ancient ghost who is an ancestor that, like, she needs to do these things and pay attention to these types of things. And she's like, I'm just going to investigate these silly little murders and assume it's not related.
It can't be related. And then
the terrors of the kingdom can't possibly be related to the other terrors of the kingdom.
It's so funny because when Nehemia finds out that Selena has been talking with Elena and has had all these, like, interactions, she's like, you've been talking to the queen and you didn't fucking tell me. Why aren't you doing anything about it? And I think that's kind of like a constant issue, though.
Speaking of Nehemia and Selena, their relationship really flipping bothers me the whole way through. I don't know why I said flipping. Like, I've just like not said the word fuck multiple times earlier, by the way. But something about their relationship that really irritates me is Nehemia knows that something's up with Selena. She's more than who she said she is, and even when she becomes like, and that she figures out that she's not Lillian, her like stage name for the competition, she is Selena. And Selena has such interest in the word marks, and Nehemia doesn't tell her about the word marks, and yet is drawing word marks under Selena's bed, but is saying to Selena, these things are bad, you can't touch them. So then when Selena finds the word marks under her bed, she washes them away
Bad.
and gives Nehemia more work to do. And Nehemia could be
Yeah.
like, for fuck's
She's
sake.
like, I'm trying to save my kingdom.
Unpopular opinion.
I don't want to be fucking expo markering word marks under your bed. Can you like cut me some slack?
Listen, unpopular opinion. I know that like there's a problematic bit about Nehemia's storyline. I totally get that. And I also completely respect like the crazy position her character was in. Like I do. However, I am not actually Nehemia's biggest fan. Like she at the time, like this whole book, I was just kind of like, there's so little trust between the two of them. And then like it's just so, I don't know, like I just was like, this is your only friend and you're not gonna tell her anything. It's very Danica coded. That's what it is.
It's very weird. Their
Yeah.
relationship is very weird, and like, you know, we will speak about, I'm sure, the controversy around Nehemia's plot point to say when that appears. Is that Crown of Midnight?
Yeah.
Yes.
We will speak about that, and we'll probably speak about the controversy that the Seraph came up against because of her decisions to write Nehemia in a certain way later. But I do very much agree. Nehemia is very like she pushes Dorian to be a certain way. She's pushing other people to do certain things. She's pushing Selena, but also not telling them anything that they need to know or could help them. Yeah.
I mean, it's frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna have to talk about her a lot in the next book, but I think
It's so frustrating because, as you both said, that's not how friends work, especially when you do have like this close relationship. Like, if anything, we overshare. So, like, if I
mean, I put in the group chat telling you what I did in the bath. And
good job.
Could you imagine if I knew someone you worked with and I knew exactly why you were having a hard time at work and I just never fucking told you? But then I like gave you these weird little nudges of like, oh, maybe you should lead that meeting or something like that. Like it was very like that. Like it was like wanting you to think it's your idea, but then never telling you why, never giving you like the actual advice. Like it's like, I don't just have a conversation.
Like, stop leading me with breadcrumbs. Like, give me the whole fucking loaf and let's get on with it, you know?
And also, this is a problem with her and with Elena throughout the whole series is like not until like Kingdom of Ash do they actually trust Selena with like the knowledge of what's actually going on and what actually needs to happen by
for
the end of the
anyone
series.
who maybe like doesn't know this as well, Kingdom of Ash is the last book in the series.
Yeah.
It is like the pinnacle.
So it's like, to get all the way there and then still this ghost has been like just hemming and hawing the whole time, and that starts here. Like it's like always giving like a little bit of information but not enough information to do anything about it, and it's like, why wouldn't you just tell her what's going on? Like, I mean, I guess that would make the series one book and it would all be over, but still not really. Air of Fire still needed to happen.
It did. Yeah. So I do too. I'm so excited.
I think that's my favorite book in the
I love it.
It is also my favorite book, although Throne of Glass comes in very close with me, because I sort of switched between them. Air of Fire is my favorite book where I'm like, like so amazed, but Throne of Glass is like the comfort read.
I love Air of Fire. I think, see, I get caught up between Air of Fire and Queen of Shadows. Like, I love them both. I love them so much.
Queen of Shadows.
Yeah.
I'm so close with Queen of Shadows, but there's one plot point that we'll talk about when we get there that did not hit right for me, and so it kind of like gives it just a little bit underneath there.
But so we've spoken a bit.
Air of Fire, 11.
We've spoken a bit about Selena. We've spoken about Kale, Cabbage Head. We've spoken about Dorian. We've spoken about Nehemiah. Now, what about the two baddies?
Oh, I think there's one more person we should talk about before we have to say just a snippet about Kaltane.
Oh, yes, it would be remiss to not talk about Kaltane.
Yeah.
What a little sneaky bitch.
What a sneaky bitch. When I first read Throne of Glass, I hated Kaltane so much. I thought she was so annoying.
But then there's more to her, and then you kind of go, oh.
Yeah. Now I'm like, bitch, get your bag. Like, I love her.
So, yeah, Kaltane, is honestly, it's very like reminiscent of like Victorian society in that way. Like, obviously, we know, like, that Throne of Glass is more dated in terms of the time period in which it's set, unlike Crescent City, which is much more modern. But the society that they live in is still very much so that they're going to balls and, they're having to court men and, they are on the marriage mart, that kind of situation. And Kaltane is just a girl. She's quite literally just a girl, and she wants to marry somebody that she thinks is attractive and is nice and, will get her somewhere in society. But she ends up courting Duke Parrington. And he's icky.
He is an interesting specimen. I think he's very much displayed as, he's older than me, he's a bit too handsy with me, he could be forceful, and she's very much using him as, he thinks that he's won this pretty little thing, and then she is using him to get her stab at like potentially trying to marry Dorian. But I do think it's very interesting that she displays this sort of like intellect, but then she is used by Duke Parrington at the end.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think the entire like tagline of her story in the first few books is really like, if you fuck around, you find out, because she really believes. I think she's also very emblematic of how like, when you're so young, you think you have, and especially when you're kind of jaded, you think you have the world figured out and you think you can handle anything. And she really thinks she has a handle on everything and that she can manipulate these men and get exactly what she wants. But, she's fucking around and she's going to find out.
The manipulated. Yeah, she then gets manipulated.
Not to mention, she's like hopped up on opiates, like most of the book.
All the time. Yeah, she's
like all the time. Terrible. But
R.I.P. Kaltane, you would have loved Charlie X for sure.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we see kind of like this mean girl thing go on as well, like between Kaltane and Lillian, who she thinks is Lillian, but in actuality is Selena.
Yes.
And she is reporting to Duke that she's worried that Selena or Lillian is dangerous, and it's putting Dorian in like hot water,
You have no idea, honey bunches, but she's doing it very much. She's dangerous because she's got her grip in my man Dorian, who I want. So she goes and tells her boyfriend Duke Parrington that her husband is being manhandled by Selena.
Yeah. And she ends up being the pawn in the game. Like, yes, all of the assassins are kind of being ruled by what the king wants and being made to play this game in order to get out of whatever situation they are in. But in the end, it's Kaltane that is actually the one that is suffering more than, I'd not say more than all the others, but she's definitely having a harder time than, say, Kane and the other assassins and criminals who are like going to balls and doing all the shit that Selena's not allowed to do. But she's the one that ends up poisoning Selena during the very last competition. nearly killing her.
Duke Parrington also tells her
Yeah.
to do it and then blames it on her when it goes wrong.
But that's what makes her the pawn, is like she doesn't understand that her reputation is getting completely sacrificed just for.
She's like, tee this won't go wrong for me in any way, shape, or form.
Oh my god!
If anything, it'll just get me higher. Like, no, baby.
Yeah.
Per baby. We'll come back to Caltain in the next episode.
Well,
we will.
But I think that we should talk about our baddies.
We should.
I think that maybe we should not talk too much about the king yet. One, because we've been filming for nearly an hour and a half, and two, I think the king becomes more relevant later because he is sort of like missing in action for most of this book. But we should probably chat about Duke Parrington and Kane and their dynamic bro duo that's going on.
I think it's worth pointing out, like, all you really know about the king this book is that Selena hates him. Like, that's pretty much
He's
it.
a bit of a scary
and that he does bad things,
scary.
And he's done bad things. Yes. Maybe doesn't have the kingdom in its entirety.
Bad, and you don't know if they're. Yeah, you don't fully know how justified they may have been or not been. Like, you don't get a lot of context until later. And then at this point, we meet Duke Parrington, who seems to be
the king's bitch.
Kind of a puppet.
Oh.
Yeah, a little bit his right-hand man.
He's got friendship rings with the king.
Yeah, I think it's worth noting, like, Duke Parrington's in the very first scene. He comes with Dorian to retrieve Selena.
Ew.
And he's gross from the second you meet him.
He like slams her on the floor and is like, bow to him. I think he thinks that he can butter up Dorian the way that he can butter up the king. And Dorian straight is like, ew.
He definitely gives me the same vibes as some of, you know, when Robert Baratheon dies in Game of Thrones and Joffrey takes over and his Kingsguard, some of his Kingsguard, obviously not our Lord and Saviour Sandor Clegane, but some of the less savoury men in the Kingsguard. He definitely gives those kind of vibes.
He gives to me vibes of Peter Pettigrew and Voldemort.
I can see that.
He just like is a little bit of a snivelly,
greasy man.
I think at this point in the story, I was very much feeling Peter Pettigrew vibes. Like he just seems so weak and shitty, and like he would do anything to be in the king's favor. It's very much the vibes. Yeah.
And
what we find out later is he's very easily manipulated.
He is.
He's very.
But most interesting is his champion and his relationship with his champion. So Duke Parrington is Kane's sponsor, and we kind of see like breadcrumbs, or is kind of alluded to that perhaps Duke Parrington is helping Kane in ways that, you know, the other assassins and criminals aren't having or aren't receiving. The same, like they're not getting the same information packets,
or the same
steroids. Whatever he has, they don't.
Bit of a doping analogy for sure. Yeah,
Mr. Blow Up Muscles himself, Kane, is very much described as every time we see him, he's bigger, he looks stronger, he looks bigger, he's bulked out more.
Yeah,
he. You know, and he very much becomes like the top dog in the competition, doesn't he?
So
Selena does not like
he's
that.
the one that does best. He's the one that everyone that kind of gravitates towards, at least the ones that aren't shitty human beings. So obviously we do see Selena kind of interact with other of the competitors, one being Nox, who she actually helps at one point and helps get away from the competition and escape before the last hurrah, shall we say, of the competition. But we also see her interact with one of the other competitors who has a penance for poison, which actually comes into play in the last competition, the last duel. But all of the others seem to gravitate towards Cain because he is, becoming more powerful. He is the biggest. He is the baddest. He is the one that will probably win. So if you're in favor with him, even if you're not the champion, maybe he can help you out.
Talking about Mr. Muscle himself.
Oh no! All I can think about is Mr. Muscle from the cleaning products now.
That's the vibe he gives. He gives Mr. Muscle. Yeah.
You mean Mr. Clean?
It's Mr. Muscle here.
Yeah, Mr. Clean. In the UK, yes,
That's
Mr.
weird.
Muscle.
Okay. He's Mr. Clean.
What I could imagined him, I just imagined Cain being like a blown up version of the Michelin Man.
I imagined just the mountain from Game of Thrones by the end. Like, obviously, not from the start, but by the end.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was imagining, or like Hulk Hogan kind of vibes, like very like WWE is kind of what it was.
100%. Yeah. Like, I never pictured him wearing a shirt. Not that I thought he'd be like attractive, but for some reason he was never wearing a shirt. Like, even at the ball, not wearing a shirt.
This man was naked. Yeah.
Okay.
Naked. I mean, I didn't imagine like a dong just like floating around.
Not that naked.
My brain just did the helicopter sound from TikTok.
When Cain summons the Ridderak, and he was using the Ridderak to kill the other competitors in the competition and absorb their strength, do you think his dick got bigger?
No. That's small dick energy.
I don't think that has anything. I don't think it has anything to do with strength, and so I think it just stayed shrivelly and tiny, and probably with one of those really long foreskins, like
Naked Attraction.
Oh,
I've been watching too much of that show, and I'm traumatized.
No, I am too.
Alex showed me Naked Attraction. It's now our tradition. It's a totally off topic. It's our tradition that whenever we go to a hotel, we always watch an episode of Naked Attraction on the TV because it's always like the one thing that's on the TV in the hotels.
Weird.
And he showed me it for the first time, and when I first came to visit Alex in Scotland, and I didn't stay at his parents' house because I was scared of like being in his house for some reason. We went and stayed at a hotel. And we watched Naked Attraction, and I was traumatized.
I love how you like, let's go to a hotel. It'll be really romantic, just you and me. We'll watch telly and judge some wangs.
Yeah, like the thing is like I'm very much a person. Like when I was dating and stuff, like I'm not super shallow about stuff like that, and I'm very like I'm accepting of all the things. Everything can be hot in the right moment, but no, on that show those people went on television like that. I'm gonna judge every facet of what they look like, and I'm quite a harsh judge.
Speaking, I keep having this like think in my head. It's like back on the RIP game that we were playing earlier, and we were doing the other one, and I was thinking one, and I know that because I know we've spoken about Akatar before. And all I could think about earlier was R.I.P. the cereal. You would have loved the Kardashians.
Oh my God.
I would have said Gossip Girl.
Blind Items. Oh my God, the cereal would love Blind Items.
Oh my God,
so much.
Love Island. Just any reality TV nonsense. Yeah. Blind Items. Oh God, definitely. Anyway, that was totally off topic, but
yeah.
Back to Cain.
Where do we finish? Where do we finish the book? Now that we've established that Cain's a dick.
We finished the book by like we find out that Selena definitely experienced some kind of magical thing.
Yeah.
We don't really know what. We don't know details. We also have a sense that like the stuff going on with Elena is not over.
Yeah. So we see not only Elena coming in clutch, and saving Selena while she is drugged, which is also how she is able to see all of the ghosties and the horrible things that are around. But we also see Nehemiah using word marks in in public.
Yeah.
And Dorian's just
like in the public.
Dorian's there like, what are you doing? And it's noted like
doing interpretive dance. Yeah.
And it's worth pointing out that Kale, in the end, is very much like encouraging her not to die. Like, he very much doesn't want her to die when she's like poisoned, and is trying to be helpful.
Could you imagine?
Not successfully, 'cause he's never successful at anything. But
Could you imagine watching this go down? So you're seeing Selena getting the absolute
She's just
shit
stumbling
beaten
around.
out of her, like stumbling around drugged.
Mhm.
Kane's like laughing and thinking it's the most hilarious thing ever, and like talking trash about her parents. Nehemiah's doing like weird shit in the air. Kale is having an existential crisis outside like the ring around the field, and Dorian's just watching it all play out.
Yeah,
with a goblet, probably, just like.
yeah.
Fair.
This is an interesting. Father, you were quite right that this is entertaining.
And then, am I right in remembering that Caltaine gets taken away at the end of it? Like,
Yeah.
gets
So
pinned on her?
Duke
Yeah, it does, like,
Parrington
depends on her.
ends up going, I don't know what you're talking about, in
Yeah.
front of the king, and she ends up getting taken to the dungeon.
What do you mean you drugged Selena?
Yeah.
Which I will say, I obviously have a different opinion now that we'll talk about
Mhm.
later, but my opinion by the end of Throne of Glass of this was like, hell yeah, take that bitch away. Now we just have to knock out this Duke guy and we're done. Wow, was I naive
Oh,
about
bless
that? But
you.
I know, sweet summer
what a
child.
baby.
But yeah, I was pretty jazzed for her to like get put in the dungeon. But then it does set up kind of an interesting thing because you start to see how horribly people are treated by the king, like really through the because the only real insight we have into it in Throne of Glass is that Selena was in this horrible prison camp, but
Yeah.
she was an assassin. She had done all these
Mm.
horrible crimes, and so you're kind of
Yes.
like not. That's kind of what I mean by like you're not really aware of the entire like the real situation of what's been happening in the kingdom because you just think like, yeah, bad people go to this prison camp, like that sucks, but you did bad things.
It's kind of it was kind of funny, like after the competition, like she's in bed healing and whatnot, and Dorian's like going to his dad like, okay, so when are you going to give her the contract? And the king kind of goes, oh, might not. Might not.
Do you know what gets me about this whole thing? And one of the big things that happens at the end of this book is that Kale, obviously, as we said, is like, oh shit, maybe I don't want her to die. I know I don't want her to kill all my friends, but like also like I think like we're kind of friends. Like what's happening? Kind of maybe fancy her though too. Like what's going on here? So Cain tries to stab Selena in the back. He tries to attack her after the competition's over, and Kale kills him. Now, what I find very funny about this is Kale's reaction to this. Kale is like, essentially, I mean, this is like more in sort of Crown of Midnight as well, but we experience a little bit at the end of the book. He is torn up with the fact that he's killed a man. This is the
I was literally going to say, I have
head
so many
of
questions.
His job is
Captain
to
of the
torture for
guard.
info.
Like,
his job is to torture for info. His job is to deal with, like...
But he doesn't torture for info, and he's like totally... Like, that's what I think is so interesting about the narrative, that like Kale just didn't know any better, because it's like, what did you think the job was?
So I'm assuming the King's Champion is the one that is going to do all the killing. But what astounded me more was the fact that Kale had never killed a man and hadn't really ever seen a dead man either. So what the fuck has he been doing for the past XYZ? Like, really? Like, is this really hitting
it's been
hard
at least a couple
for you?
years, right? That he's been. So yeah, it's sort of wild, because it's also like he knew people were getting tortured. We find that out later. That's, I don't think, much of a spoiler. He kind of retrospectively thinks about, like, he knew bad things were happening in the dungeons. He obviously wasn't doing it himself. Why would that not make you a little, like, I don't know. I understand that his whole thing is that he loves Dorian and he wants to protect Dorian, but like, how do you think you're going to do that if you don't make yourself face the realities of what's going on around you? Like, it's just so strange.
It's like he doesn't want to question it. Like, he realizes like bad stuff is going on, and maybe the king isn't as honorable as he wants him to be, but he's not going to acknowledge it, because if he does, then he's going to have to question everything. And he just doesn't have the patience or desire to do that.
He just doesn't. Yeah, he doesn't have like the mental capacity to deal with that right now. So he's just pretending that most of the stuff doesn't exist, and it's.
I won't lie.
know.
When I was reading Throne of Glass, and we later find out this is not the case, but I originally assumed that he must be doing that because Dorian doesn't want to know. And so we'll talk about it more in Crown of Midnight and Heir of
Bromance.
Fire. But I was really frustrated when Dorian starts to come to terms with what's going on and tries to talk to Kale about it, and Kale's like, nope, everything's
Kale's
fine.
just too busy singing the national anthem.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, you know what I mean.
Oh man.
I mean, Kale will be one of those guys like, oh, like, yeah, it's a Nazi salute, but maybe you don't know what it means. Like, that's
Kale's very like, I will sing the national anthem of Ardalan. The national anthem of Ardalan clearly depicts what's happening, but I will sing it proudly with my whole chest and then pretend to not know what
He
it
wakes
means.
up every day and does the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yes. He like kisses a
One
photo of the
nation
king
under
before
God,
he leaves
baby.
his bedroom.
Yep.
Oh man. So, what were our
Final
overall
thoughts?
thoughts exactly?
From what I remember, my overall thoughts were really like,
Meh.
I was pretty bored. Whatever. This was okay. I guess I'll read the next one.
So,
That was
in line with thoughts, actually, I do have a question. I know, Crimson, you didn't reread this time aren't going to reread the first couple of books. But Emmy, what did you end up tabbing? Because I ended up having 3 tabs. Now, I don't tab books. It's not something that I'm particularly, passionate about, and I do read a lot of books. I feel like I read too fast and in inconvenient places to be tabbing books all the time. But I decided that for our reread, I'd be tabbing all the books because it felt like a good way to refer back.
That too.
So I tabbed history. So history in relation to Aurelia and Terrason. So all the stuff to do with Brannon and the forest and whatnot. I tabbed ongoing plot lines. So things that would come up again in the future, because obviously it is a reread, I know what's going to happen.
Yes.
And I also tabbed Maasverse. So things that I think are links to the overall Sarah J. Maas universe. And then obviously it's not Crown of Midnight, but I have added Oh My Fucking God and That's Hilarious tab in this one.
Interesting, because I have some of those too. So I have an ongoing plot line. For me, it's more like foreshadowing or things I know will pop up again later. So it's more like me recognizing, oh, this thing will pop up again later, and I know it will. So I'm gonna tab that to be like, oh, actually, it is mentioned in previous books or whatever. I have a tab for sad or emotional, which is when she's talking about her parents' deaths or what happened to her
Sam.
in the microwave. I've got a funny tab. I've got a yellow tab as well. That's Selena makes a sarcastic comment.
Oh, do you have enough?
So it's her funniest, wittiest moments. So funny is green, but if I think that really hits it, I mark it in yellow. I have a tab that's cute or aw or relationshipy moments. So when her and Dorian kiss and stuff, I'm aw, cute or whatever. I have an anger one.
Kale.
I don't use it as much as I thought
Kale
I
tab.
would, but there's a lot of no, actually Kale's got his own tab. I have a tab that's bright red called Kale Acts Like a Twat. And in Crown of Midnight, it's Kale Acts Like a Twat Part 2.
Oh, nice. So you're going to have to do multiple parts.
That man needs his own. Yes.
He might deserve a stronger word later.
Yeah.
Like in Queen of Shadows.
It's a synonym, but it works.
But there we are.
I think that is Throne of Glass in a very chaotic nutshell.
That's a big nutshell.
It was.
It's like a Brazil.
And it's the shortest book, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
for anyone watching, it's this one. It's really small.
I do believe that when we do Kingdom Hearts,
Two-parter.
Oh, that one will have to be. Maybe also Imperfect
Yeah.
Storms. I don't know about
maybe
Tower of
also
Dawn. 'cause
Air
that
of
doesn't look good.
Fire, because a lot
A lot of shit
There's a lot
happens.
of changes in that.
But to be
Yeah.
fair, we could split it into the books that were in the book because it goes into parts.
That is a very good point. We could even like
That
pause
is
the
good.
reading.
Yeah,
actually.
let's aim to do that. That would be
Yeah.
fun.
Mhm.
Well, it's been really fun going back down memory lane and seeing your reread thoughts and hearing all about our thoughts on these different characters and these the beginning of these very complicated plot lines. So yeah, thank you guys for hanging out with me for almost 2 hours now and just chatting through class. It's been a blast.
I would never want to spend my Thursday evening any other way than talking about my favorite book series. So
With my favorite people. Like, come on.
yeah, I can. But that, yeah, thank you guys for chatting for this long. We will obviously this goes up in April, so to everyone watching at the time, hello from past us as well, and also goodbye because it's bedtime.
It is.
It is too late at night for this.
I'm getting too old for this shit.
Oh yeah.
Truly.
Oh yeah. Molly,
At
you'll
our
be a
big
different
ages.
age.
I will be a
for
different
Jesus.
age. I'll be a whole new woman.
Oh yeah. Wow.
She's entering her new era.
Indeed.
Love that.
But that's it. If anyone is interested, we will be doing, obviously, as I said, either an episode per book or multiple episodes per book, depending on the book. There'll be multiple episodes for certain books that are massive and you could use as weapons. So,
Crimson knows a lot about that.
oh, she does. Thank you so much for watching or listening. If you're looking for us in any other socials, they are links down below in the description. And we will return with a normal episode next week, but tune in maybe 2 or 3 weeks' time where we talk about Crown of Midnight. So, see you guys then.
Bye.
All right. Bye.